Hello and welcome to Ewe Sew You. My name's Zoe and this is my channel all about the crafty bits and pieces that I get up to. I knit, I sew, I crochet, I dabble in lace making and weaving and spinning and all sorts of other bits and pieces. So we've got quite a bit to go through today. I've got some finished objects, I've got some works in progress, I've got some lace to show you, I've got some art to show you, and I've got a challenge project type thing to tell you about, and also a giveaway to update you on as well. So make sure you stay tuned to the end, grab a project, grab a cup of tea or coffee or whatever drink takes your fancy, and let's get started. So welcome, a very warm welcome to returning viewers, and to any new viewers a very warm welcome to you. Now at the end of today's video I am going to be giving you some information on the 250 subscriber giveaway and when I'm going to be doing that and that kind of thing. I'm also going to be giving you some information on a project challenge thing that I'm starting for my birthday. They'll be at the end of the video. I've got some projects to show you that I've finished, that I've got in progress, I've got some artwork to show you, all sorts of bits and pieces. But before we knuckle down to the creativity, there are a couple of things that I need to address, or that we need to address. They are related, but they are separate things. So first of all, unless you've been living under a rock for the past few decades, you never mind the past few weeks, we're talking decades, if not centuries, well definitely centuries, but you'll be aware that not everybody is treated the same, regardless of how often we say everybody is equal, and that we have equality. We don't. People are treated better because of the circumstances of their birth. That's not something that we can alter. People are born the way they are born. Children have a very strong inbuilt sense of what is fair. They know when you're not when you're treating people the same, when people aren't on a level footing, and we educate that out of certainly white children. Not by saying that people aren't equal. We don't say that to our children. The school system doesn't say that to our children explicitly, but it doesn't include aspects that encourage that equal thinking, that build on that innate sense of fairness that children have. So it's educated out of them. And we need to educate that back into ourselves. The protests that are going on worldwide at the moment for Black Lives Matter have not been started by one single inciting incident. They have been started in response to an ongoing, systematic, institutionalised sense of people not being equal, people not deserving the same treatment. And it's wrong. There's no other way to put it. It's wrong. We have spent too long tolerating the intolerable, and it needs to change. Now, not everybody is going to be able to go to marches and go on protests, particularly at the moment with the pandemic going on. Round where I live, we don't often see non-white faces. That doesn't mean they're not there. They're just not in as great numbers as they would be in a bigger city. But that doesn't make any difference to how they should be treated at all. They are the same. There is only one race, which is why I am not going to sit here and talk about this race, that race, and the other race. There is one race, the human race. And we need to remember that. We've forgotten it. And we've forgotten it because of laws that were written by white people 400-ish years ago, so that they could own other people. So if you think it's just because of the death of one man, look again. It's not the death of one man. It's the death of many, and it's the treatment of many. And if you think it only happens in America, look again. We exported those laws to the US. We exported those people to the US. We are responsible as a collective. And we need to address that. We need to change that. And that's what the protests are about. I've heard people, white people, refer to them as, they're inconveniencing my day. Tough. Change is inconvenient. Get over it. I've heard white people say, violence never solves anything. Rioting never solves anything. I think you'll find that's not the case. If you look back through history, not only have you got the civil rights movement, the suffragettes, the peasants' revolt, the French Revolution, marching against the brown shirts and the black shirts, you've also got the war in Iran and Iraq, the war in Syria, the First World War, the Second World War. These were all methods of people using violence to try and solve a problem. We may not necessarily agree with all of the outcomes of some of them. Obviously things are still going on in Syria and Yemen and that whole area. But people are trying to solve problems through violence, because when you are being trodden underfoot, when you are being constantly suppressed, when you are having violence done against you and your peaceful protests are not having an impact, they are not resulting in any positive action, you have to meet people in a language that they understand. And if that language is violence, then yes, sometimes you are going to need to use violence. That's what wars are about. What I have noticed from what I am seeing around the world with the Black Lives Matter protests is that the protesters, for the most part, are containing violence as far as possible. There are a few people coming in and disrupting protests. There are always going to be those opportunistic people who will do that, and they're changing the protest. But the intention of the protests is not violence. Violence is happening when violence is being brought into those protests. They're not starting out in that way. If you bring a militarised force against a peaceful protest, those protesters are going to feel threatened. They are going to need to defend themselves. And some countries, particularly the US, has a very militarised style of policing. Not to mention the fact that the president is saying, hey, you citizens exercising your democratic right to speak freely and to protest, we're going to bring the army against you. We're going to bring military action against you. It's not okay, by any stretch of the imagination. These are people exercising their democratic rights in what claims to be a free democratic country. You only need to look at the difference between how the armed protesters protesting about not being able to get a haircut and having to wear a face mask to stop them dying, those protesters happened to be white, but they were taking arms into government buildings. They weren't met with any violence. Black Lives Matter protesters coming onto the streets to exercise their democratic right to free speech and protest, to demand that they do not get murdered by the state for just the colour of their skin, are met with violence. So yes, there are going to be times when they need to retaliate, to defend themselves. And no, violence is not the ideal solution to things. It's not an ideal situation to be in. But look at history. Violent revolution does work. It does make change. But that change is not supposed to be comfortable. It's not supposed to be convenient. If it was comfortable and convenient, we wouldn't be changing. So deal with it. Get over it. People are fighting for their lives. And it's important. And we cannot let it stop until everybody truly is equal. Then all lives will matter. But until Black lives do, we can't say that at all. So read up on it, look into what's happening, look on social media to see both sides of the argument. The press are going to show you their editorial view, and that will be coloured by who owns them and what country they come from and what politics they follow. You need to get the opposing view as well. Best place for that is social media, to look at the people that are involved and to look at the literature, to do some research and find things out. A lot of the information that's coming out is very US centric. There have been some videos on Instagram about systemic racism and how it operates. The principle of that is the same wherever it happens, and it does happen everywhere, particularly in white dominated countries. That's not to say that there isn't racism in countries that aren't white dominated, but the way that the American system is modelled and worked, it comes out of the white communities, the white societies, so it's going to be more similar to those societies. There will be variations country by country. So if you are looking at the American resources and you are not in the US, take the time to find out how it works in your country, because it will be slightly different, no less serious, no less severe, but some of the ways it functions will vary. You may not be able to go to protests. There may not be any in your area. There aren't here. As I say, it's a very white area, so there isn't as vocal a group driving that forwards, because unfortunately it is the coloured people. Oh, that's an awfully, horrifically dated term. So sorry. It does tend to be black people and people of colour who are driving these protests forwards. So there may not be one in your area, and you may not be in a position to travel to where one is with everything that is going on. You may not be in a position to donate to one of the organisations that are raising money to support people who are being arrested or harassed or badly treated, or who are struggling to get by because of what is going on and because of the colour of their skin. You might not be in a position to do that, particularly with so many people having lost their jobs during the pandemic. But that doesn't mean that you can't do anything. You can talk to people, you can learn about things, you can lead by example. That is what is missing from certainly British education. I've worked in British education. We don't tend to teach the black experience, the experience of people of colour. We don't tend to teach the disabled experience. I mean, obviously there's no way that we can actually cover everything in the school curriculum. There's just not enough hours in the day and days in the week. But there is an imbalance there, and now we need to address it. And you can do that yourself. I'm not going to put a load of links down below on resources like some other YouTubers and social media people have done, because you need to look into how it works where you are. Information that I come up with is going to be very UK centred, because that's where I am. That's where I'm going to have the most impact. You need to find out what's happening where you are. So you need to do the work yourself. If you do have children and you are struggling to find a way to explain it to them, let me know, because I might be able to help you out with that. I've worked in primary schools, I've worked in secondary schools. I have experience with dealing with difficult topics with young children. So let me know if you need some support in actually doing that. I will do my best to help you out. For the most part, though, I will say children get it. The younger the child, the more likely they're going to get that people are treated unfairly. Once they've been through a bit of schooling, it starts to change a little bit. Up to around about 8, we can really make a massive difference to how children view the world. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. And we can do it by example. Once they get older than that, we need to be a little bit more explicit in how we're teaching it to them. But do have those conversations with your children. Let's bring up the next generation to not need to battle for everybody to be treated the same. So that's some of my thoughts on Black Lives Matter. It is a vital issue. It is definitely something that we need to deal with, and we need to address. The other thing that I want to speak to is related to a point, but it is different. I have quite a few former students and friends who are Cantonese. They are from Hong Kong. And a lot of them are feeling really frustrated at the moment. They have been protesting for quite a long time against the Chinese government. For those of you that are unaware of what's happening in Hong Kong, in 1997, after 150 years of British rule, Hong Kong was returned to China. Some people think that shouldn't have happened, some people were happy about it. It was quite complicated at the time. Part of Hong Kong had been given to Britain following a war, and part of it had been given to them in an agreement with China. It was quite a complicated diplomatic, political thing at the time. But Hong Kong went back to China in 1997. And something was introduced called the Basic Law, which has got about 30-ish years left to run on it before it ends, and that was meant to protect the freedoms and the civil rights of people in Hong Kong. The Chinese government is currently trying to introduce laws into Hong Kong that are eroding those civil rights. You may have seen last year some quite violent protests in Hong Kong. That's what it was about. It's about the erosion of their civil liberties and their freedom of voting. They do vote, but the Chinese government has a say in who's on the ballot paper. So it's not a totally free vote. And a lot of my friends, a lot of my former students that are in Hong Kong are feeling very frustrated and very hurt because it's a situation that just affects Hong Kong. But because of this other issue that's going on at the moment, which is super important, they're feeling like they're not being heard outside of Hong Kong. They're feeling like they've been abandoned. So to those of you who are in Hong Kong, you've not been abandoned, you're not being ignored. We do see you. Reports are coming out. Just yesterday I was looking on BBC's website, and news is still coming out of Hong Kong, certainly to the UK. At the moment, Black Lives Matter is a huge movement around the world, as it should be. There's no question there. And there are more voices there. So they are louder than the voices from Hong Kong at the moment, but that does not mean that you are not seen. You are. But Black Lives Matter has to be addressed. And it has to be solved, and it has to be dealt with. Just as your right to civil liberties in Hong Kong need to be protected. But please, please, please don't feel that you aren't being noticed. You are. We are watching. And if you are not familiar with what is going on in Hong Kong and you are not from that part of the world, please read up on it, look into it. We can't turn away from one movement and one battle and only focus on the other. There are too many injustices in the world to only look at one. So they are related, and once Black Lives Matter has been resolved and we have that equality there, people in Hong Kong will benefit from that. But I do appreciate the frustration, I do appreciate the hurt that this feeling of being drowned out is causing, but you are seen. And we do hear about it. People are aware of what is going on. So yeah. Okay, so difficult topics over with. Hopefully that came across how I intended it. I don't want to detract from one cause to build on another. They are both important causes. and they both need to be addressed. One doesn't detract from the other. One isn't more important than the other to the people that are being affected by them. Certainly Black Lives Matter is a more widespread issue, which is why it is getting more attention at the moment. But that's the serious portion dealt with. So moving on to the creative side, and thank you for obviously keeping watching to get to this point, and for staying with me. It's appreciated. So, normal service resumed, unless I decide to put that bit in a separate video, which I might. So, first of all, what am I wearing? This is the Rio Ringer tee by True Bias. It's the Sew My Style, or one of the Sew My Style patterns for May, and there will be a separate video going up to talk about this pattern in particular. So yeah, I'm not going to say too much more on that here. But I will talk a little bit about finished objects before we go into our usual works in progress. I've got some knitting to show you, I've got some lace to show you, and I've got some artwork to show you, as well as some sewing that's right here. And this is my first finished object. This is a chevron quilting cotton from Minerva Crafts. It's one of my Minerva makes. So look out later in the year for a blog post on the Minerva Makers community of this. I've used a Lacala pattern. If you're not familiar with Lacala patterns, they are cheap. It's only a couple of pounds, £2-3 to get a pattern, and they are drafted to your measurements. So you put your own measurements into the system and it drafts things out. Now, I didn't adjust on the pattern when I put my figures into the website body length, which I probably will do next time, because this shirt is rather long on me. It's kind of more like a tunic dress type thing. It's clearly drafted for somebody who's around 5'8", possibly taller. I'm 5'4", so yeah, it's a little on the long side, so I may shorten it if I were to make it again. But it is loose fitting, it's great for hot weather. It does have long sleeves, but I'm wearing it rolled up most of the time, partly because of the heat and partly because gold chevron, long sleeve shirt. I maybe should have done it short sleeve to begin with. But the make wasn't too challenging, although because Lacala patterns have minimal instructions and they're in translation, I wouldn't recommend it for an absolute beginner. Get a few garments made first so that you understand garment construction, because some of the translation is a little bit odd. It took me a little while to work out what some of the words meant. And the instructions are very minimal. It was about 12 lines of instruction to make this shirt. So get some garment construction knowledge behind you first before you make a Lacala pattern. That being said, they are a very good way to get very affordable patterns drafted to your measurements, so I will be making more from them. My next finished object is a knitting finished object. I've shown you this a couple of times as a work in progress. I've had the yarn for donkeys, and it is the Cumulus Cowl by Mina Phillip, and it is knitted in mostly West Yorkshire Spinners Wensleydale gems, but I've held the dark green with a green bright green with a dark green mohair to sort of tone down the colour a little bit and help get the gauge, and it matches the Cumulus hat that I made as a test knit a few years ago when I bought this yarn, so I don't know if it's still available because I've had it for years. But I finally finished it just in time for super hot weather. Yay! So that will be put to one side and kept for the summer. That's pretty much all the finished objects that I have to show you. Obviously I had loads of socks last time around. I've shown you all the socks that I've finished. So we'll move on to works in progress. Now, as you know, I got bumped out of Sock Madness with the last pair of socks. But the next pair round did come out. The final round pattern is going to be released tomorrow. But I made a start on the round after I got kicked out socks. They're called Mobius Madness. They've got a Mobius loop around the ankle. The actual sock bit itself is twists, like a twisty cabley pattern, and it's beautiful. Casting on a tiny Mobius is a pain in the bum. I will eventually finish them now that they're started. Don't know how I feel about the Mobius around the ankle, but I'll give it a go. So yeah, and these are in Coupe Soxier yarn. So yeah, hopefully the voices from downstairs aren't coming up into the video too loudly. It's people in the house these days, you know, hard to find quiet time. So that's that work in progress. Like I say, I will eventually get them finished because I've started. Unless I get really frustrated with the idea of the Mobius around the ankle and rip back. Some people have knitted them without the Mobius and they look really pretty, so there is that option as well. So most of my knitting time this month, well in May, has been spent on one particular project, which is this one. Trying not to drop a DPN out of it. It's out of Serdar Beachcomber, which I don't think is available anymore. I could be wrong, but I think I heard something about it being discontinued. I have this yarn in two colourways, this and a greenish one as well. I bought them to try out for the spring garden tee that I ended up making in a much smoother cotton in the end, because it's got lacy details on the sleeves, and it just didn't quite work with the thick and thin nature of this yarn. But this pattern is a free pattern. It's from 2 of Wands, available on her website, and it's called the Ballerina Wrap Top. I am in the middle of applying the I-cord tie, which then gets picked up all the way along the bottom of the cardigan. I've then got the sleeves to do and an I-cord edging all the way around, so tons of I-cord. But it should be a good wear for the summer, for the evenings, for things starting to draw in. And I'm thinking of doing the Secret Summer Crop by Jessie May to go with it. It's like a twin set almost. So I think that make a really good summer combo to wear. So that's not far from done. It's all been done in May into the beginning of June, so obviously we're on the 4th of June now. So yeah, so I'm really pleased with how that's coming, and I've not got that much left to do on it, so that's good. That should be ready to wear in a week or two. I'm ready for an FO for you for the beginning of July when I do my next roundup video. My next work in progress, I'd be really interested to actually hear what you guys think about having a series of videos on this next craft. As you saw last month, I've been doing a little bit of bobbin weaving, bobbin lace making. It's kind of like weaving, but it makes lace. Now this is my lace pillow. It's a block of polystyrene that I've covered in fabric, and on the other side I've actually got a lace project in progress. The pattern I'm using, the pricking as they call it, is from the Lace Guild. It's free, it's in the beginner section, and I've just got a bit of fat quarter, a bit of fabric that came as a fat. It's not quite a fat quarter. It's came as a square with a magazine a few years ago, but I haven't used it for anything. So I'm keeping that over the top to keep things in place when I move it around and to keep it cleanish, keep the caps off it. But if you'd be interested in a few very introductory bobbin lace videos or some needle lace videos, that kind of thing, by all means let me know. I am very much a beginner. I've dabbled in it on and off over the years. But this is set up ready for me to do a little bit of filming if that's something of interest of you. I mean, I might do it anyway and put it out, because I think there will be people who will be interested in seeing bobbin lace, but let me know if you're one of them. Just so I can gauge how much interest there is, and then how much of a series of videos to do, how much detail to go into, that kind of thing. I'm planning on doing several with this pricking, using different combinations of lace stitches to get different textures into it, and then build it up into an overall lace picture. So that's my lace making progress at the moment. There will be more of that to come over the next few months, because I am enjoying the lace making. I don't pick it up all that often because I do need the headspace to be able to work on it. So the cats need to be being calm and quiet, so that I can focus on it without having to worry about chasing a cat off from dangling on the end of my lace. But it doesn't take too long to do the size of pieces that I'm doing. I mean, okay, I'm doing this one in stages and taking my time over it, but that's because I want to get the tension right. I want it to be good because it's going to be working with other pieces. So let me know if you're interested in bobbin lace and needle lace and lace making in general, and I will start putting those videos together. But I will gauge how big a series to do, how much detail to go into, how much depth to show, by how much interest there is. Okay, so that's the fibre arts and sewing and that kind of thing to show you. I've not touched my embroidery or my cross stitch in at least a month. Stuff happens like that. I've been doing a lot of baking and a lot of gardening and that kind of thing, so it's not like I'll be doing nothing. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I've been getting out my art supplies again. This is actually going to lead into the information about the project challenge thing that I've set myself. So I got out my watercolours, which I haven't used in about 20 years, and I've been having a bit of a dabble. So my first painting in over 20 years is this fantasy landscape. Now, this was a really interesting project to work on. So what I did was I did a colourful, bright colourful wash on the background of the paper, and then looked at it to find out what I wanted it to be, so that the wash told me what the picture was going to be, rather than me going, right, I'm going to paint this. Which is not an approach I normally take, but I'm really pleased with how it turns out. Hopefully the doors banging in the background aren't too distracting, but obviously I'm not alone in the house at the moment, with us still being on essentially lockdown, even though restrictions are lifting a bit. We're still basically on lockdown, particularly in our house, because we've got a few things to be wary of. So yeah, the wash told me that it wanted to be a landscape. I could see the tree in it, I could see the hills in it. So I'm really pleased with how that came out, and it was a lot of fun to do. So that's the first one. I have been doing a lot of exercises as well, but I'm not going to show you all of those. I'm just going to show you the actual finished pieces or things that are potentially going to develop into a piece of art. So that's my first landscape. I've also been dabbling in working with some florals. I'm not massively big on florals in general, but they do take a lot of skill to do, and I can incorporate them into other pictures. And actually, I am warming to the florals in terms of artwork. I don't mind the odd one here and there, but I wouldn't go big floral wallpaper or anything. I mean, my aim with my art is to get to the point where I have something that I am happy to put on the wall in my own home. At least that's my current aim anyhow. So it's my florals. Some of them are actual flowers, or they're meant to be actual flowers. Well, they're all meant to be actual flowers. I used a YouTube tutorial, so I can't for the life of me remember what half of them are. So they came out alright. They don't all look like they're meant to. The thistles in particular don't look anything like thistles, but it was fun. I learnt some skills. Then we have a landscape in a globe. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. So I've done a wet on wet wash for the sky, which has worked really nicely. And I started with a wet on wet wash for the hills, and then developed it with dry on wet techniques on top. And a bit of lifting for clouds and things, so that turned out really nicely. I'm really pleased with that one. I can see me doing more of the circular style of pictures. I think they look quite interesting. My next one, again, we have a fictional landscape. Again, we've got wet on wet. This one I was experimenting with leaving the moon or the sun, yes, daytime's the sun, yellow and everything. Well, I left that bit blank to begin with, and I didn't put water on this when I was doing the wet wash to get some resistance there, to leave that empty space. And I've gone in and put yellow on afterwards. I did also use this picture to try changing textures of the paint, and I put a bit of salt on where the sea is here, but that hasn't really come out very well. In terms of, you can't really see the change in texture, and I think that's because of the scale of the sea. There's more hills than sea in this picture, and I think I maybe need more surface area to have the impact of that texture. But I'm quite pleased with the composition of this one. It works quite well from a distance with the trees on the horizon and so on. So again, developing my skills. It was a combination of wet on wet and dry on wet and dry on dry. So yeah, progress being made there. And then we have my only landscape picture. Oh, and it's upside down. My only portrait picture. Everything else has been landscape. I was experimenting with floral composition. So to say, I'm not massive on florals, but this kind of thing I quite like, and I could see this being the cover of a notepad or a card for somebody, that kind of thing. This is also the first piece that I've done where I've stretched the watercolour paper. For those of you that aren't into watercolours, obviously you'll know from getting paper wet yourself that when you get paper wet it wrinkles up and you get peaks and troughs and what have you, and that can cause problems with watercolours. So even though the watercolour paper is thicker, this is 140 GSM paper, so it's almost like card. It still wrinkles up when you get a lot of water on it. So when you stretch it, you soak the paper and then you stick it down to something hard. I didn't quite soak this long enough, I don't think. I have got another piece of paper stretched that I soaked for slightly longer, but again, I don't think I've stretched it enough. So I still need to work on that. My masking tape has also left a little bit of sticky residue on the side of this paper as well, so that's something I need to consider moving forwards. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with that, and I think that would make a really nice Mother's Day, Easter card, birthday card for your parent, thank you card, that kind of thing. Or as I say, in front of a notebook would look pretty cool in something like that. So, may not put it on the wall, but I can see it being used in stationery. That sort of thing I don't mind florals on. Fabric I don't mind florals on, but for decor, I'm not massive on florals. The odd highlight here and there is fine, and actual flowers, absolutely fine. And also in art-related news, and this really is the bit that leads into my challenge that I've set myself for my birthday. I've been participating in a free set of online workshops from Igor Matita, who is a Russian artist. He has an art studio in Moscow, and he does offer paid online courses. So the free workshops were kind of like a trial advertisement type thing for his paid online courses. If you have the money to do it and you are interested in pencil drawing, it is well worth looking into. Igor is very much into art therapy. So he's not necessarily looking at training you up to be a professional artist as much as he's getting you to enjoy the process of art whilst creating photorealistic drawings. And look the guy up on Instagram, look him up on YouTube. His YouTube is mostly in Russian. His drawings are almost indistinguishable from black and white pictures. It's phenomenal. So I did the workshops with him and have produced some pictures. They were obviously guided because they were in a workshop, so my next step is to see if I can reproduce that without anybody saying, and now we're going to do this. So first of all, there were some introductory sessions that you did by yourself, which there were 3 of them, and that's produced this sketch of a face. So that's broken down, and she did the eye first, then the nose, then the mouth, and you were able to do the other eye in your own time. She looked quite cool when she was like half a face, but I wanted to practice doing the other eye as well. So that's the first one that I've done with Igor. The first of the 3 webinars, so they were live broadcasts, live streamed from Moscow. I suspect, I don't know if the bit with him actually drawing was live or whether that was pre-recorded, but there were staff from his studio in the chat throughout the broadcast. So the first session, we had a picture of a chihuahua being fussed as our reference photo, and the idea was not to replicate the photo exactly, but to look at the skills to produce photorealistic drawings. He uses hatching rather than smudging and shading. So the hand is obviously quite tricky to draw, and obviously my dog doesn't look particularly like a chihuahua, but that's what happens sometimes. It's still quite cute, and it's the most realistic. These are the most realistic drawings I have ever done. So that turned out quite nicely. Then we had, for our second workshop, a portrait of a woman, a blonde woman. It was a black and white photo. Again, we weren't replicating the photo exactly, but we were looking at the techniques to produce photorealistic drawings. So that's that one. That is without a shadow of a doubt the best portrait I've ever produced. It's not necessarily a likeness of the model in the photo, but it is the most realistic that I've done. And the third workshop was this cute kitty. As a thank you for doing the free workshops, he has given us access to another pencil drawing workshop for Husky, but I've not done that one yet. So I am getting back into my art at the moment. I'm really enjoying it. I find it quite meditative. It gives me a chance to sort of mull over things that are going on in the world and sort things out in my own head, which is really, really useful, particularly in times like we are living in at the moment. Now, I've mentioned in previous videos that I was going to be doing some sort of make-along type thing for my birthday, which is tomorrow, the 5th of June. I will be turning the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe and everything, which, if you know your Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, means I'm going to be 42. So, this idea in my head has gone through many changes. It was originally going to be a make-along with prizes and what have you, but, well, for a start, I'm not really giving you much notice, so I think it would be unfair to do hey, we're starting now, make along for 42 days, which is 6 weeks, without giving you a chance to bring anything together. And also with what's going on in the world, it felt a little bit frivolous to be doing that kind of a thing at the moment, which is also why what I'm going to say about the 250 subscriber giveaway is what it is. It feels a little bit frivolous to just be giving stuff away and celebrating things in the midst of the start of this huge movement. So I'm going to postpone the giveaway slightly, just into sort of the middle to late June. We have hit over 250 subscribers now. Yay! And obviously we are looking for more, so like and subscribe and tell your friends and all that kind of thing. But there will be a giveaway. There will be a project bag and some bits and pieces from myself to send out to somebody. Announcement to follow later in June, some point in this month, just not this week, because it just doesn't feel like the right time to be doing that, and I'm sure you can appreciate why. So, birthday thing, I do want to mark that because being a nerd, 42 is something. With the added bonus that the original first ever broadcast of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a radio show, was in March in 1978. So Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy also turns 42 this year. So it seems appropriate to be doing something themed around 42, themed around Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, perhaps, if you want. So I am going to be, over the next 42 days, so that is 6 weeks, be focusing on improving my art, particularly the drawing, but also the watercolour. So the aim is to be doing some form of art, whether it's an exercise or an actual picture, every day from the 5th of June for 42 days. So that will be into the middle of July. So around the 17th, 18th, I will put the exact date up on screen or down below or somewhere. And it will be on Instagram as well. So that is what I am doing. I'm calling it my Project 42. So Project 42 or ESY Project 42. I need to check the hashtags. So that if you would like to join in, you are more than welcome to. You can join in by doing something themed around Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There are some fantastic knitting patterns out there inspired by Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You could draw stuff from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You could just do something around the number 42. It could be a garment with 42 stripes. It could be 42 squares to go into a blanket. It could be 42 seams on some really complicated garment that you're sewing. anything like that is absolutely fine. Now, the biggest change to what I had in my mind, because in my mind I had the idea of choosing a skill that you want to improve for 42 days, which I'm doing drawing. You are welcome to do another skill if you like. Learn a language. Write a book in 42 days. Anything you want to see progress on, that is what you can do. You could also do, as I say, do the 42 theme, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy themed thing. That's fine. But given what is going on at the moment, I also want to reach out to those of you who are protesting, who are finding it hard at the moment, who are struggling to process everything that's going on, or are giving a lot of yourself to your community at the moment, to use Project 42 as an opportunity to regroup, to take some time for yourself away from everything else that is going on. And I know you can't totally switch off from everything. I know I have the privilege of being able to do things without thinking about the colour of my skin, to do things without thinking about the ramifications of it or how it's going to be perceived. And not everybody has that privilege. But if you are heavily involved in community action, if you are heavily involved in protesting, it is important that you look after yourself as well. So I'm going to suggest that for 40 minutes, twice a week as a minimum, you take some time for you to do something that makes you happy, that makes your heart sing, that helps you to regroup and refortify yourself, ready to step out again. You are giving so much to the world at large. Make sure you don't forget to give something to yourself as well. And the same goes for anybody who is struggling with seeing things on the news that maybe isn't so directly involved. If you are finding it hard, 40 minutes twice a week, switch off social media, go and read a book. If you are somebody who has yet to begin their journey into learning about these issues and addressing those inherent biases in themselves, as a bare minimum, 40 minutes twice a week, processing the information that you have picked up over the course of the rest of the week in whatever way that works for you. If that means doing some drawing whilst you're thinking about it, or listening to a podcast on those topics, or finding out the next set of books that you want to read, those kinds of things. 40 minutes twice a week minimum. That doesn't mean that you can't do more, particularly if it is a self-care or a development thing. Over the next 6 weeks, set that time aside and keep it set aside. You do need to decompress if you are giving a lot to the world. You do need to regroup so that you can continue to do the vital service that you are providing. So yeah, make of it what you will, effectively. The 42 days, 6 weeks, to focus on either developing something, progressing in something, improving on something, looking after yourself, taking time out for yourself and setting that time aside, make it a habit if it's not already, or something Hitchhikers related. Choose your own adventure, effectively. So that's that. I'm not planning on giving out prizes for Project 42. It is simply something that I am doing, and if you would like to join in, these are the ways that you can join in with me. I'm doing it anyway. So that's all that I have today for you. I'm going to go and get this video edited and the Sew My Style video edited and decide whether I want to split this one into 2 videos or not. So yeah, keep safe, wash your hands, take care of each other, look out for each other, particularly if you are out in the world. Find out more about things that you haven't been thinking about that you now realise you should. And yeah, keep crafting, stay safe, and until next time, bye bye for now.